Do you think government underestimates the issue of food security in this country?
No, I don't think so. I think we are pretty much on top of it, and it's very serious. What we are seeing is a situation where government has actually responded and risen up to the challenge of actually being able to feed its people. Perhaps there was a little bit of a delay, but not by that much. The president has moved forward, and we are instituting measures to actually ensure that we bring in the grain. But even as we do that, please notice the other measures the government has put into place. Maybe you're talking about the grain maize, but it is another whole area where the government has done very well in terms of livestock. And, in February this year, because we have instituted the Kenya Livestock Insurance Program, and it is in place for the first time, and the only country in Africa, we are able to pay out our farmers, quite a number of them in the Asao region, and we cushion them against the ravages of...
And that's fair enough, but because we are talking about Unga in this very specific discussion, and it's a very passionate issue for a number of Kenyans, you've talked about drought, and the fact that that is a contributing factor to the reason why we have very high prices in food commodities. So one of the measures government said would counter that was the irrigation scheme, the Galana Kulalu. But then what's happened to that?
Galana Kulalu, my thinking is very simple, and my understanding of it is that we are setting out model farms. We are trying to get this thing to be productive. We have had success in the past. You must know there are several irrigation programs, and one of them was Bura. At one point before government intervention earlier on, we were just having a few, bags per hectare. But we are able to increase that harvest. I believe that when Galana is fully operational, I think we should be able to have a pretty good harvest.
But where is the maize from Galana so far?
We have not brought it to the table, but I believe that over time we will get this product. I think maybe what we are doing, we want instant solutions to these issues. I don't think it is government to blame on this matter, because we didn't wish for these droughts to actually happen. And the droughts will come. We will have another one in 5 years. The question is, can we be ready to actually bring in the grain, because we are food deficient as far as maize is concerned? Can we be able to do that before our irrigation projects kick in?
The reason why I'm asking you, okay, Dr. Ayeko,
I'm glad that this is coming on the table. I think, by and large, we can say that the government responded in a timely manner in this drought. But I'm not so sure whether that was timely. The question is, how do we respond to these shocks quickly? We knew the drought was coming. All the early warning systems had projected we are going to have these problems. What is the role of the strategic grain reserve, for example? Because that is what is supposed to bridge the gap until supplies come in. How much have we released from the grain reserve? 450? Yeah?
No, the total volume. I think the issue with the grain reserve is we're no longer able to keep it replenished to the level that it should be. And the NCBB went into the season, they were able to buy less than 1 million bags. They had money to buy 2 million and a bit. They weren't able because there wasn't enough maize.
And what was released was not even grain, for food, right?
No, what was released was good quality. It was this year's harvest, the last year. They released 750,000 bags. There's probably another 600 and something left. But given the drought situation, I think the government made the right decision to sit on some of it. I expect one of the interventions they could make when they're more comfortable is to release some more of it. But certainly as millers, we've said to the government, make sure you know how you're going to replace it and when, and don't count on the local harvest, because the real harvest won't come until October, November. We get what we call the early South Rift harvest. Typically it's not that much of it available. Planting was, the rain of planting was tight. So I think that's part of it. We just don't have enough to intervene in.
Unfortunately, let me just make a point on what he has just mentioned. Is the South Rift crop this year is going to be much depressed because of the drought. They plant in October, November, December to harvest in early July, August. That is what is expected to bridge the gap. They lost about 80% of that crop and they had to replant. Some farmers have decided to plant other crops, like what we've seen in Kitale happening. So they've gone for sweet potatoes or even wheat. Okay? So we are not expecting much. I think the point I'm trying to bring out here is, if we know, like Dr. Gakuru has mentioned, that drought will come in, say, 4 to 5 years, and all the systems are pointing that way, there is evidence, and I believe that the government should be acting on the evidence that they get, whether it is from whatever source. But if it is credible evidence, they should act on it. We don't have to wait until things are out of hand to declare the drought a disaster, number one. I know it was good because that sets in motion other steps. For example, the waiver of the common external tariff.
Yes.
That needed to have been done in order for that to happen. But you see, all the indications meant that the government should have acted earlier than they did.
The warning signs. I mean, once we declared drought a disaster, we should have known that we'll get here soon enough.
But actually, compared to previous years, and all the gentlemen here would agree with me, is that we moved a little bit faster than has happened before. Because if you look at what happened in 2008 Horn of Africa drought, which was really terrible, the response, the total response by government then was actually just 2.1% of the total ravages of that drought, both livestock and to crop farmers. But this time, we responded much, much earlier.
I'll just a minute. I've seen some comments even coming in from people who are eating this ugali, people who are at the shops looking at the prices going up. And the question is, when you sit in the organizations where you sit, do you think about the ordinary Kenyan? Do you think about the consumer? Do you think about how the decisions are going to affect them? I mean, we understand, like with the millers, at the end of the day, you have to make your profit. It's a business at the end of the day. But how much consideration do you give to the consumer?
From our perspective, all of it. We don't have a business without consumers. I think one thing we continue to forget is maize milling in this country is one of the most competitive sectors in maize milling anywhere in the world. You have a few large millers who represent maybe 35%. You've got a significant, what we call informal sifted millers, maybe represent another 35%. Then you've got the posher millers, and then ultimately you can buy the corn on the cob. You have tremendous choice. And as I often say, there is a brand for everybody. It's just a question of where. What happened this year, there just was not the maize. I think one of the things the government's got to get to grips with, it's going to get worse, not better. Each year goes by, we will grow less and less maize for ourselves. And those that have the money and know about this will take advantage of that situation. Be it a farmer who has the ability to hold maize. Be it a trader who has the ability to buy that maize cheaply and sit on it. And over the years, through the EAGC and the CGA and others, there have been a lot of efforts made to improve on-farm storage because there's been significant losses. And these opportunities just create, I don't use the word hoarding. I think it's not correct. It's speculation. People take advantage of the market and sometimes they lose out. This year it was pretty easy to see where the business was going. Tegemeo gave a warning in October. We gave a warning in November, written warning. In January, it looked like decisions had been made. Duty didn't go off until early April, in fact, on white maize in the budget reading. And I just want to, before I close this, come back to what Mr. Kyoko said. We've got to find a way to develop information better that we all trust. Because at the moment, we're still talking to each other, and I trust you don't go to a farmer, go to a miller. And so I think the government, with everybody's support, and maybe the EAGC can talk about it, the big nations have wonderful ways of predicting the crop and knowing where the crop is, because everything goes into central storage, warehouse receipting, and maybe you could comment about some of that.
The millers were saying that there was a shortage of maize, and that's why you can't produce enough unga.
Correct.
But government officials have said that about 1 million bags were provided. And,
you need to put that in context.
But the uptake was not as high as we expected. That millers only took up around 600,000 bags.
The thing is, you need to put that in context because, first of all, you need to check your statistics and tell how much maize do we consume. The average we hear, and sometimes the figures move up and down. A few years back, we used to work with a figure of 1 bag per person per year. So if you're talking about 40 plus million Kenyans, you're talking of 40 million bags, which means you need 40 million bags for a 12 months period. You heard what we are producing. Yes, I mean that's just just an average because you consume maize from different ways. Even when you have your chicken, there's some maize there, and your eggs, because the feed that is producing that is from grain. So when you look at that and talk about 1 million bags, it's a drop. It's so little. A million.
And I would expect you to take up.
Can I clarify? The government announced it would release 1 million. It didn't. It released 750,000. Of which 450,000 went to the members of the Cereal Millers Association, who represent roughly 35. 300,000 went to what they call medium and small scale millers. I happen to know for a fact some of that ended up in Arusha for sale. No one's been tracking that part of the business. And I think it's because there's a
How does it get there? I'm interested.
Well, I don't know it enough there, but let me just make a comment before we lose trail of the initial point that he was making about drought. One of the comments that you hear very commonly around this table is that the rains failed, that they delayed, so we are going to have a shortage. And I think it's a tragedy that we are so dependent on rain-fed agriculture to feed ourselves. And whereas we very much appreciate such efforts as Galana Kulalo, I would think that there is also a need for a greater conversation around the need for, say, micro-irrigation schemes, so maybe supporting 20, 30, 50,000 people, because all these areas that we are saying we need to diversify our production systems, we need to get more people to do maize and other food crops. Part of the incentives that we have to provide to farmers in this country is the supportive infrastructure. And this does not just touch on roads and stores and such stuff, but irrigation, because all these things that we are talking about can only be provided as part of public support to farmers so that we are more in charge of our food situation. If some of those things were to happen, Ash, I can tell you, we have capacity, and farmers in this country are very determined. They are very able to produce all the food we need and even to export.
So the big challenge is water. If we don't provide water, and if we don't do irrigation systems that actually do, like a good example is the Yatta Canal that was done years back before independence. And if you go to visit there and you see how many farmers are able to get crop through that canal 12 months of the year, is a good example. And we have opportunity in this country to do that. We've got big rivers, Tana, Athi, Wasongiro, and many others, that you can just do canals at lower sort of costs. And the other challenge here, because we are in a new constitutional dispensation where agriculture is one of the sectors that was devolved. And production is actually a responsibility of the county governments. So we need to get an accountability from the county governments. What are you producing in your counties? And how much are you putting in agriculture?
But, I mean, so shall we speak about from where you sit? You had a Vision 2030. Now you're actually vying for governor's seat. I'm announcing your candidate to everyone else. What are the specific recommendations that you gave for this problem?
There are a couple of things. One, of course, it's so difficult to move people from maize because that's what they have been consuming for a couple of generations now.
Yes.
So we've got to continue to support the grain basket, that is Kitale, up and down. Then we got to actually start to move the people away from maize into other crops. And we talk about orphaned crops and get that produce to the market. If you go, and I want to support my colleagues who talked of micro irrigation programs like what happens in Kirinyaga, Kibiregwe, if you have ever passed through there, those people are never hungry the whole year out. But when you go up the hill and you get into Kieni, where I am vying to be a governor in Nyeri County, you find that Kieni, when other places are receiving food support, they are also getting food support. And yet the soil there are so fertile. They have got rivers flowing out of Abadeas and others out of Mount Kenya. We just need to actually be more, be more focused and give more support. But that has to be done by the county government because agriculture has been devolved.
So there must be political will to begin with. I know we want to divorce politics from the issue, but the politics do actually dictate the outcomes.
There has to be political will.
Right.
And allow me, just to reflect on the budget, recently. How much do we allocate for agriculture in general? I think the budget puts it at 1.7%.
Yes.
Then you add to what goes to support agriculture within the counties, perhaps we get to 3%.
And it's funny because we signed the Maputo Declaration, right?
Yes, which requires that we
10%.
need to hit at least 10%.
Yeah.
So with the 3%, how much can you do? How much can you do to support agriculture? Okay. So we talk of these very good, initiatives. I mean, very good ideas, irrigation, micro irrigation. How much can you do with that? Okay. So I think we need to be serious. If we think that agriculture is still the mainstay of the country, that it is the one that's driving the economy, then we need to put serious investment in agriculture.
We need to put the money where,
yes,
where it deserves. Mr. Hutchinson, perhaps as we wrap up, what do you think is the solution we need to be discussing right now?
I think we've talked about it. I think is to continue to work to improve productivity. And I worry that we keep talking like irrigation's the savior. There are many, many farms in this country that are growing 20 bags an acre that could grow 50 bags an acre. So let's not neglect, there's some wonderful soils here, some great climates. Even in drought years, it's possible to get crops using conservation tillage practices, correct timing of planting. So I think we shouldn't all hang on to, well, irrigation's going to save us. Let's not neglect the other side. I think that's important. And I'm very much subscribed to the idea we've got to learn to eat other crops. We will not die. And I know that won't happen overnight. We've got potatoes, arrowroot, cassava. There's some wonderful, wonderful crops here that get high yields, the pulses, etc. And I think, for me, the third is to develop an information system that allows us to know how much we're growing and where it all is, so that we can all trust each other's. We're going to be short this year, we're going to have surplus next year. I would say that.
Mr. Masina, as we wrap up?
Yeah, I think my contribution in terms of way forward is that in addition to what has been said, something else that might trigger and maybe create a sustained process is a focus on agro-industries and agro-processing and seeing how we can put in place what we call structured trading systems where you are able to have projections of what, for example, Nick's factory would require for the next 12 months or so, and work backwards, working with farmer groups to contract, to put the produce in warehouses and have good data systems and good connections so that there's a market that continues and we have a market system that supports the process and you get off the swings of the situation that we are in.
And finally, the farmers.
I think in addition to what has been mentioned, my colleagues, I think my emphasis would be to really get to focus on ensuring that there is sufficient support to the Kenyan farming community. But then also very quickly, I think we've not spent sufficient time around this table today discussing about post-harvest losses. It's a major source of food insecurity because we lose upwards of 20% of what we produce, and there should be ways that all of us can contribute towards ensuring that we lose much less than we are doing currently of all that we have spent money on trying to produce.
Thank you. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining this discussion. We hope to be seeing more of this. This is the first time we're seeing all of you together, one round table on TV, discussing this really important issue. And you at home can join this discussion. Our hashtag is the round table at KTN News at Asha Mwilu. What do you think about the cost of maize, the cost of milk, the cost of sugar? And is there a government initiative to solve this issue? During the discussion, we'll be looking at all your feedback coming in, and of course in our subsequent bulletins, we'll be discussing all angles of this story. I'm Asha Mwilu. Have a good evening.
The Round Table was live from the Swiss International and Anna Mount Hotel, Nairobi.